Not all history is presidents and sort of important people. A lot of times it's the regular people who made history and made our town. We have oil and gas up here, we have ranching and farming, we have military and railroad history. So it's really a interesting crossroads of all these different pieces that make Texas unique and make it such a great state. North Texas and Wichita Falls specifically has all of those. So it's a really interesting place.
I think it's important for the youth to realize where they come from, where are the roots, where are their families, their parents, maybe their grandparents. I think we're now in that second, third generation gap there. And I think it's important for you just to know where you're from, and I think to keep the culture going as well.
Those are things that make up your community. They are as important as anything else. And it's important that our children look at this and realize how these people did this. And if you lose that history, then you lose how you got to where you are, who you are, and I don't know how you move forward in the future if you don't know what your past was.
That is important for Wichita Falls, to continue to think about preservation and to continue to think about what we want to do for future generations and how we want our town to look.
Wichita County Heritage Society was actually formed in 1974, and it came about because practically overnight the original beautiful depot was torn down. The railroad decided they didn't need it anymore, and it just kind of almost happened overnight. So there were a lot of citizens that were really, really distraught about that because it was a magnificent historic structure and wasn't near ready to fall down. And so that's when the Heritage Society was formed. And it was actually formed with the idea of preserving the historic integrity of the downtown area and to educate the public on the importance of historic preservation.
Not every historic building can be a museum, but they can be repurposed as apartments, as offices, as restaurants, and I think we've seen a lot of that done very well in Wichita Falls.
It actually feels really amazing to be living in something that was started maybe not even 40, 50 years after the town was established. Of course, the history of the building is the fact that it was used as a sanitarium, a drug and alcohol rehabilitation and bipolar rehabilitation clinic. Unfortunately for Dr. White, shortly after he built this tuberculosis clinic, they found the cure for tuberculosis. If you could just imagine the thought process behind what Dr. White had envisioned for this property, I know originally it had 13 acres, all the tireless nights of planning and working and doing everything he can to make this a reality, that hopefully I'm doing him justice by keeping this building alive.
It's the beauty of these buildings. You don't see architecture like this anymore. Look at in this house alone, look at the stained glass windows and the absolutely fabulous woodwork that's in this house. And then you think how these buildings were built. All of the wood in this house, all of this beautiful woodwork was milled right here on the grounds. It was all done by hand.
We came and looked at the house. We talked with one of the homeowners that owned this home. And the very next day we submitted our offer. We just had to have this place. You don't often see a building of this size come up on the market. We want to furnish at least the downstairs, the non-personal areas that, going to be 1920s Art Deco, that if a guest or somebody, if we do show the house off, the second you walk in the door, there's no doubt in your mind that you just walked back into the 1920s.
Sometimes historic buildings are not in good shape. They get torn down, things get thrown away, they were stored in a nasty garage. Things like that happen, but because of all the distinct areas of history that are present in Wichita Falls, we've been able to preserve a decent amount of each one.
Your first thought cannot be, okay, let's just tear it down and start all over. Your first thought needs to be, okay, how important is this building? What is the history in this building? And is there a way to save this building and utilize it for the future? It's a landmark, local landmark. It has a national registry, and it also has a Texas historical marker. So it is very, very significant to this area. There are a lot of other houses that are very historic. Olive Country Club has amazing houses, but this one has a unique story. This is one of the only homes left from our original founders. It was built in 1909 by one of the main founders, Frank Kell, and his wife, and it never had any other people living other than the Kells. This has never been lived in by any person other than the Kell family.
We've only lived here for a year and a couple months, so the planning has been rewarding, and I think the more rewarding part will be in the future when we're actually done what we're doing and seeing that our dreams came to reality and we actually turned this into a functioning home. The vision, it was kind of hard to see at the time, but the longer we lived here in the planning processes, we figured out what we're going to do, where we're going to put things, and it's definitely going to be our forever home.
I'm a newcomer. I've only lived here 2 years, but I am always trying to learn more about where I'm living, and I'm learning something new almost every day. I think that learning where you're from, learning where you live is really important because it gives you a sense of knowledge and a sense of pride in where you come from and where you live. And so I think that everybody could do a little more homework and learn more about Wichita Falls and some of the interesting things that happened here. Right now, there's a lot of activism concerning like undertold stories. So especially women and minorities, people of color, organizations are making a greater effort to include those stories.
Zavala Hispanic Cultural Initiative is a nonprofit organization that helps the community in a whole bunch of different ways. In 2001, the city of Wichita Falls and just several individuals from the foundations, they noticed that the Hispanic population in Wichita Falls was growing rapidly. And so they wanted to make sure that students and just the community had the resources that they needed, and especially with the Hispanic community, because I guess people weren't used to that. So as the population was growing, they noticed that there was a need for that. We do focus a lot on education, but we also focus on making sure that we share the culture and we protect the culture and make sure that people are educated about the Hispanic community.
Cultural organizations make towns unique. They make them a good place to live. Whenever I move to a new place, or even visit a new place, I want to learn about where I am. So I try to visit the cultural organizations, the museums, the buildings, to kind of get an idea of the people who were here before me and what happened to make the town what it is today.
Zavala is not the only organization that's hosting events. I think that we have kind of set a foundation and others have grown from there. So the Zavala Latin Festival, that's one of the large events that in the city. We have over, anywhere from 4,000 to 6,000 people attend that event. It's usually in October. And then we have events like other organizations are doing for the celebration of Dia de los Muertos, and that event really focuses on that culture, on Mexico especially, but on that culture of being able to share with others that it's not Mexican Halloween. It's more than that. There's a celebration, there's culture behind it, a heritage behind it, and celebration behind it. Programs like the Zavala International Dancers, the dancers really focus on not sharing just events or dances from Mexico, but sharing dances from all over Latin America. So they're learning from Brazilian dances and from Honduras and Salvador and just different areas and how the community reacts to that as well. So sharing those dances and arts and culture with the city is I think is one of the most important things when it comes to events in the city. It's also important to kind of preserve some of that historical culture. And so I think one of our goals and a lot of the Hispanic organizations in the city is to try to help students with that throughout the different events that organizations like Zavala host. It's exposing them that there is other than just their small world. We're exposing them to education, we're exposing them to culture, to dances, to arts, to make sure that they're well-rounded and ready for the world.
Being active and discussing the importance of history with children especially is going to be the way that we continue to preserve the important pieces of our heritage, because if future generations don't think it's important, then they won't work to save it. And there are a lot more stories that have not been told.
There are areas in town where we've lost some very unique structures. East Side comes to mind. There are some really unique places on East Side. The YOC building, that's a very, very, very unique building. That was actually built by the Senior Junior Forum and donated as the Boys and Girls Club. There are places like that that I wish the community would pull together a little bit more to make sure that we don't lose those places. One of the things, and I have had it in my head for a long time, is that I want a historic marker for Sputter Field and would love to see baseball come back to Sputter Field. That's one of our most unique areas. And while all the structures are not there anymore, that site is there, and it's very, very important.
We recently just actually found on eBay, we find some weird stuff on eBay that's connected to Wichita Falls, but we found a ticket stub from a Booker T. Washington football game, which was the black high school in Wichita Falls. And so stuff like that, we have trouble finding, and we understand that the black community doesn't really trust museums and organizations like us because in the past we have not told those stories. And so I think that museum leadership and organizations are doing their best to tell the more diverse stories. They still have work to do. We still have work to do, but we're working on it.
I really believe that if you don't watch history and listen to it and learn from it, you're going to repeat the same mistakes that you made back then.
It's important for others to know about the culture, to understand why some of the things are happening in the city, why some of the things are changing.
When buildings are this old, they take a lot of love and care. But new buildings are not built like this. It's important for our heritage. It's important for our children. Like I said before, you can't expect them to have a love of this area if they don't know what the history of the area is.
I think that as a whole, everyone could stand to learn more about the community that they live in. It's really exciting to have visitors come in and they've lived in Wichita Falls their whole life and they're able to learn something new about where they live. That's really rewarding because a lot of times people have lived somewhere and they walk past history every day and they don't even notice